The dim glow of emergency lights flickered across the vast chamber, casting long shadows on walls etched with faint scars of ancient carvings. Elias wiped sweat from his brow, his calloused hands gripping the edge of a rusted control panel. At 42 he was the oldest of the crew, his frame wiry from years of scavenging derelict stations, but his eyes still burned with that unyielding curiosity that had kept him alive this long. Beside him, Kira hunched over a tangle of exposed wires, her nimble fingers dancing with practiced speed. She was the youngest at 28, sharp-tongued and quick to laugh, but right now her jaw was set in concentration, a streak of grease smudging her cheek. "These conduits are older than the stars," Kira muttered, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous hall. The air hummed with the low thrum of failing life support, a reminder that the station, once a grand nexus of human exploration, had been abandoned for centuries. They weren't supposed to be here. The Alliance had declared it a no-go zone, haunted by radiation leaks and structural decay, but Elias had a hunch. A map fragment from a forgotten archive pointed to this place, the Hall of Echoes, where humanity's first interstellar council had convened before the Great Departure. Joran, their third, paced nearby, his broad shoulders tense under the weight of his toolkit. A former engineer from the outer colonies, he was cautious to a fault, always the one double-checking seals and scanning for traps. "We should head back to the shuttle. Sensors are picking up micro-tremors. This whole section could collapse." His voice carried the clipped accent of Mars-born settlers, steady but edged with worry. Elias shot him a grin, though it didn't reach his eyes. "And miss the prize? That core reactor's our ticket out of debt. One good salvage haul, and we're free agents again." He leaned in closer to the panel, tracing a faded inscription with his finger. The words were in Old English, a relic language. "We depart, but the walls remember." A chill ran down his spine, not from the cold, though the temperature was dropping, but from the weight of history pressing in. Kira sparked a connection, and a holographic display sputtered to life, projecting ghostly blueprints of the hall. "Got it?" "The reactor's 2 levels down, but the path's blocked by a security bulkhead. We'll need to reroute power manually." She stood, brushing off her knees, and met their gazes. "Team effort." Joran sighed, slinging his toolkit over his shoulder. "Fine. But if it shakes again, we're out." They moved as one, descending a spiral staircase that groaned under their boots. The air grew thicker, laced with the metallic tang of decay, and the walls seemed to whisper with each step, faint vibrations like memories stirring. As they reached the lower level, the first tremor hit. Not a quake, but a deliberate pulse rippling through the floor. Lights overhead shattered in a cascade of sparks, plunging them into near darkness. Elias caught Kira's arm as she stumbled, pulling her close. "What the hell was that?" Joran's scanner beeped urgently. "Not seismic. It's artificial. Something's powering up." From the shadows ahead, a low hum built, and the bulkhead began to iris open, not with a welcoming grind but a reluctant screech, as if the station itself resented their intrusion. Beyond it lay the reactor chamber, its core pulsing with faint blue light. But flanking the entrance were automated sentinels, relics of the old guard, dormant drones awakening with whirring servos, their optic sensors glowing red. "Run!" Elias barked, shoving Kira toward a side passage. They bolted, the drones pursued a staccato of mechanical footfalls echoing off the remembering walls. Heart pounding, Elias glanced back. Joran was lagging, toolkit banging against his leg. In that split second he saw the truth. The hall wasn't just abandoned. It was alive, guarding its secrets with the fury of forgotten glory. Ilara's claws scraped against the rusted hatch as she pried it open, the metal groaning like a beast roused from slumber. Dust motes danced in the beam of her helmet light, swirling through the stale air that hissed out from the chamber beyond. She glanced back at Crix, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the faint glow from their portable scanner. "It's stable enough," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. "But the readings are off, residual energy signatures like the place is still alive." Crix nodded, his segmented limbs clicking as he adjusted the harness holding their excavation tools. He was the cautious one, always double-checking the seismic maps before they took a step. "Alive or not, we proceed slow. The archive said humans built to last, but that was cycles ago. One wrong move and this whole ruin collapses on us. He shone his light ahead, illuminating a corridor lined with what looked like seamless stone panels, etched with faint, swirling patterns that caught the eye and held it. They moved in tandem, Ilara leading with her scanner humming softly, mapping the unseen structures beneath the floor. The air grew cooler, carrying a metallic tang that made her frills twitch. She'd read the old transmissions, humanity's final broadcasts from this outpost, a grand hall on the edge of their expansion. Departed, they said, but why? The galaxy had wondered for millennia. As a xenoarchaeologist, Ilara chased those ghosts. Crix, her engineer partner, kept them from joining them. A low rumble echoed from deeper in, vibrating through the walls. Ilara froze, her tail lashing. Did you feel that? Crix's mandibles clicked in alarm. Seismic activity? No, the map shows nothing. He tapped his device, but the screen flickered, then went dark. Power drain. Cracks spiderwebbed across the dome above, dust sifting down like gray rain. Ilara's scanner beeped wildly. The residual energy wasn't dormant, it was awakening, feeding on their presence. Crix, we need to. A section of wall detached, slamming down between them with a thunderous crack. Crix yelped, scrambling back as debris rained. Ilara lunged, grabbing his arm, pulling him toward the pedestal. The orb flared brighter, as if sensing their desperation. In that moment, she realized the hall wasn't just a ruin, it was a guardian, stirring to protect its secrets, and they were intruders in its eternal vigil. Ilara gripped the rusted railing, her knuckles whitening as the tremor rippled through the floor. The grand hall's vast chamber echoed with the groan of settling stone, a sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat over the past week. Dust sifted from the arched ceiling high above, catching the dim glow of emergency lights that flickered like dying stars. She glanced back at Jax, who was hunched over a makeshift console pieced together from scavenged panels. His fingers danced across the wiring, sparks occasionally jumping to singe his gloves. "Any luck?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. The air hummed with the low whine of failing generators, and somewhere in the distance, a support beam creaked like a warning. Jax didn't look up, his brow furrowed in concentration. The core's holding for now. But these walls, they're not just stone. Readings show neural imprints, old ones. Human echoes, maybe from the founding days. He paused, yanking a cable free with a grunt. If we don't reroute power soon, the whole archive section collapses. And with it, everything we came here to save. Ilara nodded, her mind racing. The hall had been humanity's nexus for centuries, a colossal archive of knowledge etched into its very walls. Stories of exploration, blueprints of starships, the raw data of a species that had touched the void. But now, with the exodus underway, the structure was rebelling. Some ancient failsafe, triggered by the mass departure, had awakened defenses meant to protect secrets from outsiders. Cracks spiderwebbed the floors, and false corridors shifted like living mazes, trapping the unwary. She turned to Mira, the young archivist who'd insisted on staying behind to salvage what she could. Mira knelt nearby, her tablet clutched like a shield, scanning faded inscriptions that glowed faintly under her light. Cautious by nature, Mira had always preferred the quiet certainty of data to the chaos of action, but her eyes now burned with determination. "These walls remember," Mira murmured, tracing a symbol that resembled a stylized galaxy. "They're not collapsing randomly. It's selective, sealing off the non-essential vaults first. If we lose the core archive, it's not just history gone, it's the keys to rebuilding out there." She gestured vaguely toward the stars beyond the hall's sealed portals. Another shudder rocked the chamber, stronger this time. A chunk of ceiling plummeted nearby, shattering against the floor in a spray of debris. Ilara dove forward, shoving Mira out of the way just as shards pinged off her suit. Jax cursed, shielding his eyes, but the console sparked violently, screens flickering to static. "Damn it," Jax spat, slamming a fist against the panel. "Overload." The reroute backfired, it's pulling power from the wrong relays. He wiped sweat from his forehead, his usual wit sharpened by frustration. "We need a manual bypass, but that means going into the sublevels. Alone." Ilara straightened, brushing dust from her shoulders. The risk was clear. The sublevels were a labyrinth of forgotten maintenance shafts, where the hall's memories manifested most unpredictably, holographic guardians flickering to life, or floors that gave way to simulated voids. One wrong turn, and you'd be lost in echoes of the past, reliving humanity's triumphs and failures until your air ran out. "I'll do it," Ilara said, her voice cutting through the settling dust. Brave wasn't a choice for her, it was the only path that made sense. "You two keep the upper levels stable. Mark the path on the map, double-check the imprints." Mira hesitated, her fingers tightening on the tablet. "Captain, the readings show anomalies down there. It's like the walls are grieving, pushing back against us leaving." Jack shot her a look, half grimace, half smile. "Grieving or not, we've got no choice. Humanity's departing this old pile of rock for good. Might as well make sure it doesn't take our legacy with it." Ilara unclipped her harness, the weight of her toolkit settling on her back. The air grew thicker as she approached the access grate, the metal cool and unyielding under her palms. She pried it open with a screech that echoed unnaturally, as if the hall itself protested. Peering into the darkness, she saw only the faint pulse of emergency strips leading downward, winding into shadow. "Watch your step," Jax called after her, his tone lighter than the situation warranted. "And if you see any ghosts, tell him we said goodbye." She flashed him a quick grin before dropping into the shaft, the lid clanging shut above. The descent was a controlled slide, her boots scraping against the rungs as the temperature dropped, the air turning stale with the scent of ancient circuits. Whispers seemed to brush her ears, not voices but fragments, laughter from long-ago assemblies, the hum of debates that shaped galaxies. At the bottom, the corridor stretched out, walls etched with luminous veins that throbbed like arteries. Ilara activated her scanner, its beam cutting through the gloom. The bypass node was 200 meters ahead, but the path twisted, illusions shimmering at the edges, ghostly figures of scholars poring over star charts, fading as she approached. She moved forward, each step deliberate, the hall's pulse syncing with her own. A low rumble built, and suddenly the floor tilted, forcing her to grab a protruding pipe. Dust cascaded, and in the haze, a holographic form materialized, a stern-faced elder, eyes fixed on her. "You depart," it intoned, voice echoing from the walls. "But the memories stay. Prove your worth or be entombed with them." Ilara's heart pounded, but she didn't falter. Gritting her, the dim glow of the hall's bioluminescent veins pulsed like a fading heartbeat, casting long shadows across the etched walls. Elena crouched beside the control pedestal, her fingers tracing the alien script that refused to yield its secrets. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not from heat but from the gnawing certainty that time was slipping away. The air recyclers hummed erratically now, their filters clogged with the fine dust of millennia, and each breath carried the metallic tang of impending failure. Marcus wiped his brow with the back of his hand, his toolkit splayed open like a dissected insect. "This pedestal's got more locks than a politician's conscience," he muttered, his voice echoing slightly off the vaulted ceiling. He jabbed a probe into a seam, sparks flying as the ancient mechanism resisted. Lila hovered nearby, her tablet clutched tightly, eyes darting between the readouts and the widening cracks in the floor panels. She was the cautious one, always calculating odds, and right now those odds screamed evacuation. "Nothing," Marcus said, slumping back. His plan had been simple: bypass the hall's lockdown sequence, seal the outer doors, and buy them hours to extract the data core. But the walls, those damn sentient walls, had anticipated it. As he'd initiated the hack, tendrils of energy had snaked from the etchings, frying his makeshift interface. Now the hall trembled, a low rumble building from the depths, as if the structure itself disapproved. Elena stood, her jaw set. "We can't wait for another try. The shuttle's prepped, but if these walls collapse..." She didn't finish. The stakes were clear. The core held records of a lost civilization, humanity's first real bridge to the stars, but losing it meant losing their way home through the nebulous storms. And worse, the trio trapped inside. Lila's voice cut through, sharp but steady. "The auxiliary vents, reroute power there. It might trigger a partial shutdown, give us a window." Her caution warred with necessity. She'd argued against entering the hall days ago, citing seismic instability, but Elena's grit had pushed them forward. Now, with the floor bucking beneath them, Lila's idea felt like their only shot. Marcus grinned despite the chaos, his wit a shield. "Vents it is. Just don't blame me if we end up swimming in alien goo." He scrambled to his feet, re-rigging cables with practiced speed. Elena covered him, scanning the shadows for more energy surges. The walls whispered, or seemed to, in faint vibrations, memories etched in stone awakening to defend their silence. As the rumble intensified, a section of ceiling groaned and gave way, debris cascading like a waterfall of forgotten epics. Elena shoved Lila aside just in time, the impact jarring her shoulder. Pain flared, but she pushed it down, grabbing Marcus's arm. "Now, go." They bolted toward the vent access, the hall's protests growing to a roar. The plan backfired in the worst way. The reroute stabilized the doors but unleashed a cascade of holographic projections, ghostly figures of the hall's builders, pleading in silence. Distraction or trap? Elena couldn't tell, but the images clawed at her resolve, showing worlds long dead. Humanity's ingenuity had cracked the vault, but at what cost? The walls remembered, and they weren't done yet. Ilara's boots scraped against the etched stone floor, each step echoing like a whisper in the vast chamber. The air hung heavy with the scent of dust and something metallic sharper than the ozone tang from their failing lamps. She glanced back at Kale, his furred shoulders hunched as he wrestled with the jammed panel, his claws clicking futilely against the alien controls. "It's not budging," he growled, his voice a low rumble that barely cut through the growing hum from the walls. The hum had started as a vibration underfoot when they triggered the inner seal, but now it pulsed like a heartbeat, syncing with the faint glow rippling across the murals. Those images, humans tall and unyielding standing amid what looked like shattered stars, seemed to shift in the light as if watching. Ilara's pulse quickened. She'd come here chasing legends of the departed, the humans who built this hall eons ago and vanished without trace. But legends didn't account for the structure waking up around them. "Try the override sequence again," she said, keeping her tone steady despite the sweat beading on her brow. Her gloved hand hovered near the scanner on her wrist, its readings spiking erratically. Resource shortage was their immediate killer. The air recyclers in their suits were down to 30%, and Kale's alien physiology burned oxygen faster than hers. If they couldn't seal the auxiliary vent, the chamber would flood with unfiltered atmosphere, toxic to both of them. Kale snarled, slamming his paw against the panel. Sparks flew, illuminating the frustration etched into his scaled muzzle. He was the cautious one, always calculating risks back on the outpost, but here in the belly of this forgotten relic, his patience frayed. Human tech, human puzzles. Why did we think your ancestors left easy answers? He wiped soot from his face, eyes narrowing at the mural closest to them. A figure in armor, arm raised as if commanding the very stone. Ilara knelt beside him, pulling her toolkit from her belt. The plan had been simple: breach the inner hall, map the core archives, extract a data crystal before the seismic tremors worsened. But the first tremor had cracked the entry conduit, and their backup drone was lost in the rubble. Now this panel, supposedly a simple lock, resisted every code she'd pulled from the ancient databases. She pried at the edges with her multi-tool, the metal groaning in protest. A sharper vibration rattled through the floor, sending pebbles skittering. Ilara's tool slipped, slicing a shallow cut across her palm. She hissed, blood welling up warm and sticky inside her glove. "Damn it. The walls are reacting. It's like the whole place is remembering." Kale's ears flattened. "Remembering what? Your kind's glory days? We're not tourists, Ilara. If this fails, we're buried with their ghosts." He grabbed her arm, pulling her back as the panel sparked again, brighter this time. The hum swelled, and from the far end of the chamber, a section of wall began to slide open, not smoothly but with a grinding screech that set her teeth on edge. Dust billowed out, carrying a chill that seeped through her suit. Beyond the new gap lay a narrower corridor lined with more murals, but these glowed steadily now, figures of humans interlinked with biomechanical vines that pulsed like veins. The auxiliary vent was there, according to the scans, their ticket to breathable air. But the opening came with a cost. The floor beneath it cracked audibly, fissures spiderwebbing outward. "We go now," Ilara decided, snapping her tools shut. Adrenaline surged, sharpening her focus. She was the brave one, or so Kale teased, but it was grit that pushed her forward. Human grit, stubborn as the stars her ancestors had claimed. "I'll take point. You cover the rear and watch for collapses." Kale hesitated, his witty barbs silenced by the stakes. "And if it's a trap? These walls might remember how to crush intruders. Then we adapt. Like they did." She flashed him a grim smile and stepped into the corridor, the hum now a roar in her ears. The air grew thinner with each meter, her suit's alarms beeping softly, a reminder that time was no ally. Behind her, Kale followed, his heavier steps a reassuring thud amid the chaos. The corridor narrowed, forcing them single file. Ilara's light beam caught on the walls. Humans not just standing but merging with the stone, their faces serene amid what looked like cataclysm. A low rumble built again and she quickened her pace, heart pounding. The vent loomed ahead, a grated maw half obscured by fallen debris. She reached it, fingers fumbling for the release latch, but as she pulled, the floor buckled. Kale shouted a warning, lunging forward to grab her harness just as a chunk of ceiling plummeted. It smashed down inches from them, sealing the way back in a cascade of rock. The corridor shuddered, lights flickering, and Ilara's scanner screamed, "Oxygen at 20%. The plan had backfired spectacularly. They were deeper in, more trapped than before. "Forward," she gasped, hauling herself up. No choice now but to press on into the heart of what the walls remembered. Kale nodded, his caution yielding to the fire in her eyes, and together they advanced, the glow of the murals their only guide through the gathering dark. The dim glow of the emergency strips flickered along the corridor, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts on the etched walls. Elena pressed her back against the cool metal, her breath steady but her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. The air recyclers hummed faintly, a reminder that the hall's ancient system still clung to life, even after centuries of silence. She glanced at Marco, who crouched nearby, his toolkit splayed open like a surgeon's tray. His fingers, grease-streaked and nimble, worked at the access panel with the precision of someone who'd outwitted machines his whole life. "Got it," Marco muttered, his voice a low rumble that cut through the tension. A click echoed, and the panel hissed open, revealing a nest of frayed cables pulsing with residual energy. "These walls remember more than we thought. Look, neural imprints." The old humans wired their stories right into the structure. Lila hovered at the rear, her scanner held like a shield, eyes wide behind her visor. She was the cautious one, always calculating risks, but now her caution bordered on paralysis. "We shouldn't be poking around like this. The seismic readings are spiking again. If the core destabilizes," Elena shot her a look, sharp but not unkind. "And if we don't get that data core, the whole expedition's for nothing. The Alliance wants proof of what happened here, Lila. Humanity didn't just depart, they vanished. We owe it to them, to us, to find out why." The ground trembled then, a low groan rising from the depths of the hall. Dust sifted from the ceiling, and Elena felt the vibration in her boots, a warning that the planet's restless geology was waking. Their initial plan had been simple: slip in through the outer vents, extract the central archive, and slip out before the rival Krell scavengers caught wind. But the hall had other ideas. The walls, etched with holographic murals of human triumphs, starships piercing nebulae, hands clasped with alien envoys, seemed to stir, projecting faint illusions that disoriented their path. And now, with the lower levels flooding from a breached aquifer, their escape route was cut off. Marco yanked a cable free, sparks flying like angry fireflies. He grinned, that witty spark in his eye unbroken by the peril. "See? These imprints aren't just pretty pictures. They're logs, personal ones. Listen to this." He patched his comm to the exposed node, and a voice crackled to life, ethereal and human, echoing from the walls themselves. "Log entry 47. Captain Reyes here. The negotiations broke down today. The Vexery demand we abandon the hall, call it, tainted by our presence. But we built this place as a bridge, not a grave. If we leave what remains of us out here, The walls will remember even if we don't. Asterisk, the voice faded, leaving a heavy silence. Elena's jaw tightened. It was like hearing an echo of her own resolve from centuries past. The hall wasn't just stone and steel, it was a monument to human grit, every etch a testament to deals struck and alliances forged before the great departure. Whatever cataclysm had driven humanity back to the core worlds, this place held the clues. Another tremor hit, stronger this time, and a section of wall buckled with a screech. Lila yelped, stumbling forward as debris rained down. Elena lunged, grabbing her arm and pulling her clear just as a chunk of ceiling slammed into the floor where she'd stood. Move. Marco, seal that panel and fall back. Marco nodded, slamming the cover shut and scooping his tools in one fluid motion. They bolted down the corridor, the wall's projections flickering wildly now, images of fleeing figures, ships lifting off in haste, a sky torn by storms. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and earth, the floodwaters rising audible in the distance, a relentless roar. They rounded a corner into the atrium, the heart of the hall, where a massive dome arched overhead, cracked but defiant. The data core pedestal stood at the center, humming softly, its surface alive with glowing runes. But as they approached, alarms blared, Krell signatures on the sensors. The rivals had breached the upper levels, drawn by the seismic activity like sharks to blood. Elena skidded to a halt, drawing her pulse rifle. They're here. We grab the core and fight our way out. No turning back now. Lila's face paled, but she nodded, her scanner beeping a confirmation of the core's accessibility. Marco cracked his knuckles, eyes gleaming. Let's give these walls a new memory, one worth remembering. The first Krell drone whirred into view, its red sensors locking on. Elena fired, the shot echoing like thunder, and the chase began in earnest. The hall shook around them as if urging them onward, its ancient stones bearing witness to this fragile band of humans reclaiming their lost legacy. Ilara gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The corridor lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced like specters across the bulkheads. We've got hull integrity at 60%, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. That micrometeor storm hit us harder than the scans predicted. Jax leaned over her shoulder, his breath hot and ragged. He was the cautious one, always double-checking the readouts, but now his eyes darted between the screens and the viewport where debris glittered against the void. Reroute power from non-essentials. Life support first, then engines. He punched in the commands, fingers flying, but the ship groaned in response, a deep, metallic shudder that vibrated through the deck plates. In the engineering bay below, Mira wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her gauntlet. Tools clattered around her as she wrestled with the exposed wiring, sparks flying like fireflies in the dim glow of her helmet light. She was the witty spark of the crew, quick with a quip to cut the tension, but solitude amplified her doubts here. "Come on, you stubborn beast," she muttered to the flickering panel. The storm had sheared through the outer plating, and now auxiliary systems were failing one by one. If she couldn't seal the breach, the air would leak out, slow and insidious until the cold claimed them. Back on the bridge, the first plan unraveled. Jax's reroute stabilized the engines for a moment, but then the NAV computer spat an error, trajectory compromised. They were drifting toward the asteroid field's edge, where gravity wells pulled like hidden snares. Ilara swiveled in her chair, facing him. "We can't just patch and pray. That field's alive with rocks. Another hit like that and we're scrap." He nodded, jaw tight. "Agreed." Mira status. Her voice crackled over the comms, laced with strain. "Breaches sealed on 3 sections, but the main one's fighting me. Need more juice down here or it'll take hours." Ilara's mind raced, piecing together fragments from their logs. The hull, that ancient structure they'd charted on the fringe world before departure. Its walls etched with warnings of these very storms, echoes of some long-gone civilization's folly. Humanity had left it behind, but its lessons lingered in their databases. "Wait," she said, pulling up a schematic. "The auxiliary thrusters. If we vent the forward bays, we can use the recoil to nudge us clear. It's risky, loses us half our fuel reserves, but it'll buy time for Mira to finish." Jax hesitated, his cautious nature warring with the urgency. The ship lurched again, a warning light bathing the bridge in red. "Do it," he finally said. "Better half empty than adrift." As Alara initiated the sequence, the deck tilted sharply. Alarms wailed anew, but the stars outside shifted, pulling away from the encroaching rocks. In engineering, Mira felt the surge of power flood her tools, the panel yielding under her assault. She laughed, a short, triumphant bark. "That's the stuff. Holding steady, give me 10 minutes. The maneuver worked, but not without cost. Fuel gauges plummeted, stranding them farther from their jump point. Alara watched the readouts, the weight of isolation settling in. The hall's walls had remembered the perils of the void, now so would they. As the storm's fury ebbed, the crew shared a silent glance through the comms, a bond forged in the grind of survival, humans against the uncaring black. Alara's boots echoed against the polished stone of the antechamber, each step a deliberate thud that cut through the humming silence of the alien machinery. She paused at the threshold, her gloved hand tracing the faint etchings on the wall, swirling patterns that might have been script, or just the scars of time. Behind her, the great hall stretched empty now, its vaulted ceiling swallowing the light from the few remaining glow orbs. Jax knelt nearby, his toolkit splayed open like a surgeon's tray, wires and circuits spilling out in a tangle that spoke of hasty work. "We can't leave it like this," Jax muttered, not looking up. His fingers, steady despite the sweat beading on his brow, twisted a final connector into place. The device he'd jury-rigged from scavenged parts hummed to life, a low vibration that traveled up Alara's spine. It was meant to be their failsafe, a way to lock down the hall's ancient defenses if the pursuers broke through. But the air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were pressing in, remembering every footfall that had echoed here before humanity's exodus. Myra's voice crackled over the comms, sharp and urgent from her vantage point outside. "Scans show 3 skiffs inbound, closing fast. They've got the Council's markings. Definitely not friendlies. You two done playing archaeologist?" Alara glanced at Jax, who wiped his hands on his pants and snapped the panel shut. He was the cautious one, always double-checking seals and calibrating flows, but tonight his eyes held a spark of defiance. "As done as we can be. The lockdown sequence is armed. One wrong move from them, and the whole chamber seals tighter than a vacuum lock." They moved as one, slipping through the antechamber's narrow archway into the corridor beyond. The air here was cooler, laced with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen, and the walls narrowed, forcing them to sidestep exposed conduits that pulsed with faint blue light. Alara led, her pulse rifle slung low but ready while Jax covered their rear, his own weapon a makeshift thing cobbled from hall relics. The plan had been simple: extract the last data core from the hall's heart, then vanish into the undergrid before the Council's enforcers arrived. But nothing about this forsaken outpost was simple. A distant rumble shook the floor, dust sifting from the ceiling like gray snow. Alara froze, pressing her back to the wall. "That wasn't thunder. They're shelling the outer perimeter." Jax nodded, his face paling under the helmet's glow. "The shields are holding, for now. But if they breach the hall proper..." He didn't finish. They both knew the cost. The walls, etched with humanity's final treaties and triumphs, would crumble under alien fire, erasing what little legacy they'd fought to preserve. They pushed on, the corridor twisting into a labyrinth of service tunnels. Alara's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of their earlier failure. The initial extraction had gone sideways when the core's guardians, automated sentinels dormant for centuries, had awakened prematurely, forcing a retreat that left half their team pinned. Only grit and a desperate reroute through the vents had saved them, but not without losing comms to Lena back at the ship. Now with the skiffs closing, their clever adaptation felt like a fraying thread. "Split here," Jax whispered as they reached a junction, one path sloping down toward the undergrid's heat vents, the other hugging the outer hull. Alara shook her head, her breath steady despite the knot in her gut. "Together. Draw them off if we have to." It wasn't bravery speaking, not entirely, just the unyielding camaraderie that had carried humanity this far, from the hall's grand departures to these shadowed chases. The rumble grew louder, vibrating through the stone. Myra's voice cut in again, laced with static. Impact in 30. Get clear, I've got a distraction prepped, but it won't buy you much. Elara keyed her response, fingers flying. Copy. We're in the tunnels. Hold the line. She met Jax's gaze, a silent pact passing between them. Whatever came next, the walls would remember their stand, not as victims but as the last humans to defy the fade. They plunged into the downward path, the air thickening with the scent of ozone. Behind them, the antechamber's hum faltered, then surged as Jax's device activated on its own, sealing the hall with a resonant clang that echoed like a final farewell. The enforcers would find only echoes now, but the chase was far from over. Elara's heart pounded in rhythm with their steps, the weight of the core in her pack a tangible promise. Humanity's ingenuity wouldn't end in silence. Elara gripped the console, her knuckles whitening as the ship's alarms blared a staccato rhythm that matched her pounding heart. The hall's corridors stretched behind them like veins of forgotten stone, pulsing with the faint glow of emergency lights that flickered in protest. She glanced at Jax, who was wedged into the access panel below, his tools scraping against rusted conduits. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his hands moved with the steady precision of someone who'd rebuilt engines from scrap a dozen times over. We've got maybe 10 minutes before the whole section seals off, Marcus said from the pilot's seat, his voice tight but even, fingers dancing over the controls. He was the cautious one, always calculating angles and escape vectors. But now his eyes darted to the viewport where the massive doors of the hall loomed, half ajar like a reluctant jaw. Beyond them, the void of space waited, indifferent to their scramble. Jax grunted, pulling a sparking wire free. This junction's fried. The aliens built for eternity, but their power relays? Junk after a millennium. If I can reroute from the auxiliary. A low rumble shook the deck, dust sifting from the ceiling in fine curtains. Elara braced against the bulkhead, her mind flashing to the archives they'd uncovered. The hall, a nexus of a long-extinct civilization, its walls etched with hologlyphs that whispered of alliances broken and species lost. Humanity's delegation had come to claim a stake, to prove their grit among the stars, but now it felt like the structure itself rebelled, sealing away intruders. Jax, talk to me, she urged, her brave facade cracking just enough to let worry seep through. She'd led this team through asteroid fields and diplomatic minefields, but this, trapped in a tomb that remembered every footfall, was different. The stakes weren't just survival, it was the data cores they'd salvaged, the proof of human adaptability that could shift galactic perceptions forever. Lose them and Earth's bid for the frontier dissolved like vapor. He twisted a connector, sparks flying like angry fireflies. Got it, bypassing the main grid. But it'll draw from the life support. Air's gonna get thin fast. Marcus nodded, not looking up. Better than suffocating in here. Elara, seal the inner hatch. We're burning thrust on your mark. She hit the override, the hiss of pressurization echoing as the hatch clamped shut. The air recyclers whirred louder, compensating, but she could already feel the subtle shift, the oxygen thinning, making each breath a deliberate pull. Jax emerged, smudged and triumphant, clutching a makeshift harness for the cores. She's purring now. Let's blow this crypt. The ship lurched as Marcus fired the engines, the frame groaning against the hall's magnetic grip. Elara strapped in, watching the walls slide past, those etched surfaces, glowing faintly with the echoes of ancient treaties. One glyph caught her eye, a spiral of light that seemed to pulse in time with their escape, as if bidding farewell or warning. Alarms spiked again, red lights bathing the cabin. Pullback fields activating, Marcus reported, sweat trickling down his temple. It's dragging us, full reverse. Jax lunged to auxiliary controls, his witty quips silenced by focus. Elara's hands flew to the stabilizers, countering the yaw with raw intuition honed from years of frontier runs. The ship shuddered, metal screaming, but inch by inch they clawed free. The doors yawned wider, stars spilling in like a promise. Then, a final jolt, the hall's defenses firing a containment pulse. The cores sparked in Jax's grip, one cracking audibly. No, he muttered, but Elara was already there, jamming a sealant patch over the breach, her fingers burning from the heat. They burst into open space, the hall receding like a colossal shadow, its walls dimming as if exhaling. Marcus eased the throttle, his shoulders slumping. We're clear. But that pulse, calms her down. We'll limp to the relay station. Ilara leaned back, the air still tasting metallic, the cracked core a weight in her lap. They'd escaped, but the haul had taken its toll. A fragment of their proof lost, a reminder that even triumphs carved scars. Jax met her gaze, a ghost of his usual grin returning. Next time we bring better tools. She nodded, staring at the viewport where the structure hung, silent and eternal. The walls would remember this departure, she thought, humanity's mark etched not in stone, but in the grit that carried them away. Ilara gripped the console, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal as the ship's alarms blared in staccato bursts. The void outside the viewport swirled with debris, shards of the Alliance's ancient station, fractured by the sabotage that had forced their exodus. Captain Thorne stood beside her, his jaw set like forged steel, eyes scanning the readouts with the unyielding focus of a man who'd stared down worse than this. Power reserves at 20%, he muttered, voice low and gravelly, cutting through the din. If we don't reroute the auxiliary lines soon, we're driftwood. Beside them, Crix, the avian diplomat who'd chosen exile with the humans over betrayal by his own council, fluttered his iridescent wings in agitation. His beak clicked nervously, a sound like dry leaves underfoot. The walls? They etched our pact into the stone of the hall. But now, this nebula's interference is scrambling our signals. The fleet won't know we're alive. He glanced at Lena, the engineer crouched under the panel, her tools sparking as she wrestled with exposed wiring. Lena's hands moved with precise fury, sweat beading on her brow despite the failing life support's chill. The initial plan had been simple. Slip through the nebula's edge, link with the human convoy waiting beyond the Alliance's reach. But the hidden mines, planted by those who feared humanity's departure as a spark to rebellion, had clipped their engines mid-jump. Now the ship shuddered, caught in the gravitational pull of a rogue asteroid field, each tumble threatening to shear off another solar panel. Thorne leaned over Ilara's shoulder, pointing to a flickering holographic map. We adapt or we die. Lena, can you jury-rig the shields to pulse the debris away? She emerged from the crawlspace, face smudged with grease, a triumphant glint in her eye despite the exhaustion. Done, but it'll drain what's left of the core. We buy time, not victory. Her voice carried the edge of someone who'd built her life on fixing the unbreakable, and she slammed the panel shut with a clang that echoed like a gavel. Crix nodded, his feathers ruffling as he interfaced with the NAV system, his species' innate affinity for patterns weaving through the chaos of cosmic static. I've isolated a vector, narrow but it threads the field. Humans and your ingenuity. It's why I stayed. Ilara punched in the coordinates, her fingers dancing over keys worn smooth from years of diplomacy turned desperation. The ship groaned as thrusters fired in uneven bursts, shoving them toward the gap. Debris pinged against the hull, each impact a reminder of the cost. The hull's grand arches, now silent witnesses to humanity's stand, their departure a scar on the Alliance's facade. Thorne placed a steady hand on her shoulder. We've left our mark. Now we survive to tell it. As the asteroid loomed larger, a shadow eclipsing the stars, Lena shouted from engineering. Incoming signature, Alliance interceptors. They're not letting us go quietly. The tension coiled tighter, the air thick with the hum of straining systems. Ilara met Thorne's gaze, a silent pact forged in the flickering light. No speeches, just action, the human way. The ship veered, engines screaming into the heart of the storm. Ilara gripped the rusted lever, her knuckles white against the cold metal, as the hum of the ancient generators faltered below. The air in the hall's core chamber grew thick, laced with the metallic tang of overheating circuits. She glanced at Jax, his face smeared with grime, eyes narrowed in that stubborn focus she knew too well. It's not budging, she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her arms. The overrides fused solid. Jax wiped sweat from his brow, the single flickering light overhead casting long shadows across the etched walls that seemed to whisper with the ghosts of human ingenuity, circuits and carvings intertwined like forgotten veins. He'd been the one to insist on this path, bypassing the main conduits to reach the heart of the system. Now, with the rival scavengers closing in from the outer corridors, their muffled shouts echoing like distant thunder, his plan felt like a noose tightening. "One more push," he grunted, joining her at the lever. Together they strained, muscles burning, but the mechanism held fast, a testament to the builder's unyielding design. From the shadows near the access panel, Lyra watched, her alien scales shimmering faintly in the dim glow. Cautious as ever, she'd argued for retreat hours ago, but Jax's grit had pulled them deeper. Now her multi-jointed fingers danced over a makeshift probe, interfacing with the wall's memory core. "The records show a secondary relay," she murmured, her voice a soft hiss. "But it's buried under the primary flux. If we reroute manually..." She trailed off as a sharp crack split the air, the outer door buckling under the scavenger's tools. Elara released the lever, spinning toward the noise. Her hand instinctively went to the makeshift stun rod at her belt, the one Jax had jury-rigged from salvaged human tech. "They're through the antechamber. We don't have time for HFY." The hall, vast and echoing, had been their sanctuary and curse, a relic of humanity's departure centuries ago, its walls etched with blueprints of stars and machines that still pulsed with latent power. But the scavengers wanted it all, to strip the ingenuity for their own fading empire, and the cost of failure loomed, not just the loss of this place but the erasure of what it represented. Jax nodded, his witty edge dulled by exhaustion. "Lyra, can you isolate the flux without blowing the whole chamber?" He didn't wait for her answer, already prying at a loose panel with a crowbar, revealing a tangle of wires that glowed with residual energy. The walls around them hummed louder, as if remembering the hands that had laid them, human hands, bold and unbreaking. Lyra's probe clicked, and a holographic flicker sprang to life, a map of the core, lines of code scrolling like ancient script. "Yes, but it requires a bridge. Human murals sink, your kind's trick." She looked to Elara, who hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. The caution in Lyra's eyes mirrored Elara's own doubts, but the bond they'd forged in the depths of this maze pushed her on. As the scavenger's footsteps grew nearer, boots thudding against the resonant floors, Elara pressed her palm to the interface. A jolt raced through her, visions flashing, humans laughing in these halls, departing with promises etched into stone. The walls remembered, and now they lent their strength. The lever groaned under renewed pressure from Jax, inching free as the reroute took hold. But the victory cracked too soon. A surge ripped through the system, sparks erupting like stars dying, and the chamber lights died in a cascade. In the sudden dark, Elara's voice cut sharp. "They're here, hold the line." Jax swung his crowbar, the clang of metal on metal ringing out, while Lyra's probe became a weapon, arcing electricity into the gloom. The fight was messy, desperate, each blow a defiance against the encroaching shadows, but the hall's heart stuttered, its power ebbing like a final breath. They had bought moments, not salvation, and the weight of what might come next settled heavy in the air. The dim glow of the emergency beacons flickered across the cavernous chamber, casting long shadows that danced like echoes of forgotten footsteps. Elena crouched at the edge of the fractured platform, her gloved hands gripping the makeshift tether line woven from salvaged alloy strands. Below, the abyss yawned, a chasm carved by millennia of seismic whispers in the heart of the Hall of Echoes. Marcus hovered behind her, his breath steady but shallow, the scanner in his palm humming softly as it mapped the final distortions in the crystalline walls. "Readings are stabilizing," he murmured, his voice a thread of calm amid the low rumble that still vibrated through the stone. "The resonance frequency we induced, it's holding. The walls aren't fighting us anymore." Jax, ever the spark in the gloom, adjusted the jury-rigged emitter strapped to his back, its coils glowing with the faint blue of overtaxed power cells. "Holding? That's one way to put it. We're basically tickling a sleeping giant awake, but yeah, it's not swatting back. Yet." Elena nodded, her jaw set against the ache in her shoulders. The plan had been a gamble from the start. When the hall's ancient mechanisms failed, trapping them in its labyrinthine depths with dwindling oxygen and a structure on the verge of total collapse, they turned human grit into a key. No grand weapons, no alien overrides, just patterns pieced from half-corrupted data logs, frequencies tuned by ear and instinct to mimic the hall's own harmonic language. It had backfired once, nearly burying them under a cascade of glowing shards, but now in this final chamber, the walls pulsed in rhythm with their device, as if acknowledging the intruder's audacity. She clipped the tether to her harness and leaned over the edge, peering into the void. Far below, the expedition's rover waited, its lights a beacon in the dust-choked depths. "Jax, your point on the descent. Marcus, monitor the harmonics, any spike and we abort the sink." Her words were clipped, born of necessity, not command. They'd all earned their say in the fire of the last hours. Jax grinned beneath his visor, the expression creasing his eyes. "Abort? Captain, where's the fun in that? I've got the emitter synced to my vitals. If it hiccups, you'll hear me cursing first." He rappelled down first, his boots skimming the sheer face, the line singing taut against the crystal. The walls shimmered in response, veins of light tracing paths that hadn't glowed in eons, as if the hall itself were mapping their escape. Elena followed, the descent a controlled freefall that pulled at her core. Halfway down, a tremor shook the platform above, dislodging a fist-sized fragment that tumbled past her like a falling star. It struck the rover's hull with a distant clang, but Jax was already there, securing the landing pad. "Clear. Walls are singing, I think. Listen." She touched down, unclipping as Marcus descended last, his scanner beeping approval. The air hummed now, not with threat, but resonance, a deep, resonant chord that vibrated through their suits. The hull wasn't crumbling, it was realigning, the ancient architecture yielding to the human-imposed harmony. They piled into the rover, Jax at the controls, punching coordinates for the surface breach. As the vehicle lurched upward through the access tunnel, the walls around them lit up in a final cascade of azure fire. Echoes of their voices, snatches of argument, laughter, desperate calculations, seemed to linger, absorbed into the crystal lattice. Elena watched through the viewport, a pang twisting in her chest. They'd save themselves, yes, but the hall would never be the same. Its silence broken, its memory etched with the mark of fleeting visitors who had spoken its language and departed. The rover breached the surface under a starlit sky, the desert wind whipping sand against the hull. Oxygen recyclers kicked in with sweet relief, but the hum from below faded, leaving only the whisper of dunes. Marcus sealed the log. Humanity entered as explorers, left as architects. The walls will remember. Jax killed the engine, leaning back with a weary exhale. "And we'll carry the scars. Worth it?" Elena met his gaze, then Marcus's, the weight of survival settling like dust. "Always." But as they stepped out into the night, the distant tremor echoed one last time, a farewell or perhaps a promise of stories yet untold.